share a little bit more about what's going on with the FSLN.
Right on. Thanks, Shelby. And thanks to the whole Pinnacle Prevention team for your partnership on this Farm to Food Assistance Community of Practice. It has been such a delight to be able to hand over the lead facilitation role to such capable partners. So thank y'all so much. And thank you to Christina and Jeff from the Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities team for being our partner in this storytelling effort. So we'll get to that in just a moment. And also just thanks to all of you for showing up, for being here, for prioritizing time to be in community with each other and learning from each other. That is what the Food Systems Leadership Network is all about. So a couple of things that are going on. You've sure you gotten lots of emails from me. But a couple things. One is that there are a few seats left in the Food Justice is Racial Justice workshop series that we are doing in partnership with the Collective on Racial Equity. This is a 2-day virtual course. It's on April 1st and 2nd. I just dropped the link in the chat that you can check out a little bit more about what we'll be covering and what this is all about. But especially right now, as these kinds of trainings have become much less accessible, we really wanted to prioritize free learning spaces for folks to basically hold ground and keep moving forward with our shared commitments to racial equity and justice in our food systems transformation work. So take a look if you have the capacity to participate in the 2-day workshop. We would love to have you. We've got about maybe 5 or 6 seats left there. And just a note that if these dates don't work for you, we're going to be partnering with CORE on another series in the fall. So if the spring series doesn't work for you, you can try and access the one in the fall. So that's the first thing. The second thing is if you could go to this next slide, Shelby, please. You've probably been hearing about this too, that we are really in a big transition moment for the Food Systems Leadership Network. So back in October, we um, departed from the Wallace Center, which was our programmatic home since the launch of the network in 2018. And last spring, we formed the Leadership Council of the FSLN, which has really guided and shepherded us to our new home at Multiplier, which is our new fiscal sponsor. And we just hired several new team members who start on Monday. So I'm really excited for y'all to meet them soon. And the Leadership Council, when they were really kicking off this last summer, they said, okay, as we're entering in this new chapter, we really want to connect with network members and like really explore what does it mean to be a member of the FSLN and what is uniquely needed from this network within the broader ecosystem of the food systems movement, especially in this very moment. So we've had a couple of listening sessions, we've done some interviews, but we also have a very brief survey that we would love to have more responses to. So if you go to the next slide, there is a QR code there that will take you to this same link that I'm dropping in the chat. And it really will take about 5 minutes to weigh in, and we would love to hear from you. So please accept this humble invitation from me and encouragement to let your voice be heard and weigh in to help shape this next chapter for the FSLN. As we move forward in this activation process, we'll be gathering all this intel and sort of, the data from the listening sessions and one-on-one interviews and the survey and creating somewhat of a brief that will then share back to the broader network and say, did we get this right? Is this missing some stuff? So keep an eye out for that. So the information that's being gleaned will actually be provided back to you all to sort of vet it and check it and add to it. And that'll be happening in the next like 6 weeks or so. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that next week's community food projects community of practice is definitely in the spirit of farm to food assistance. And we're having a conversation about beyond the box pantries as pathways in community food systems. We've got Jess Palmer from Keep Austin Fed, which has been doing some really interesting food recovery work in Austin, is going to be sharing about that. So just wanted to drop this in your radar. It's going to be next Wednesday, March the 25th. And I'll drop the registration link in here in the chat for y'all as well. I think that's everything from me on network updates. Always happy to answer questions and connect with any of you. So thank you for a little bit of time there to share those updates. Okay, so why are we here today? Thanks for the prompt of the slide, Shelby. As y'all are well aware, we have all, as a community and in all of our networks, have been continuing to uplift the importance of local purchasing programs. We all know what a difference the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program and its sister program, Local Food for Schools, really did for farmers in our communities, as well as community members, children, families, folks who are accessing this food, many of whom were getting fresh local food for the first time in their lives. We want to see these programs become permanent. And we've had some real headway with that. We've got legislation that's been introduced. We have a farm bill in the House that at least acknowledges this work. If it didn't give it mandatory funding, it at least like lifted it up. And that is a direct result of the advocacy work that each and every one of you and your partners have been doing by keeping this work in the limelight and continuing to talk about it and lifting up the stories of impact. And that has been a collective effort over the last several years. And I just want to really commend y'all for staying in it on that advocacy train, because I know that this last year has been very disappointing. And moments where it's like, it's all this for naught? Are we going to get anywhere? And the truth is, yes, we are getting somewhere. And so we have to keep the fire burning and keep it lit. And that is why storytelling is so incredibly important. Um, our members of Congress and just like decision makers, people with power, folks in our own communities, they need to know about local purchasing programs, why this stuff matters, and why we should direct resources to it. And the best way to get people, on our team is by telling stories of impact. And so the Food Systems Leadership Network, the Wallace Center, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, and Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities have been working together to first create some stories of impact that we brought to DC during our winter meeting. And we're going to be sharing those stories with you here shortly. But we also wanted to create a framework for and a training like this for folks to be able to create more of their own stories. And so that's what we're doing here today, building capacity within this broader community so we can mobilize our communities, mobilize these stories in a way that helps us secure permanent programming that we all care about so much. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Christina Barkel and Jeff Smith from the Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities, and they are going to lead us in this training. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan, for that wonderful introduction. Welcome to the training portion of today's gathering. I'd like to start by introducing the Groundwork Center, myself, and my colleague Jeff, who will be sharing information with you today. We are calling from Michigan, and we work for an organization called the Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities. Groundwork is an environmental organization that supports healthier kids and families, strong communities, and innovative solutions that last. And we have a couple different program areas, but our largest one is food and farming. And I'm part of the food and farming team. My title is Food Equity Specialist, and I'm a former full-time vegetable farmer, now turned nonprofit advocate. And much of my work since 2018 has been doing farm to food assistance initiatives, supporting those in my region of Northwest Lower Michigan and across the state. I have managed a local food purchasing program on behalf of a network of food pantries and meal sites since 2018. And for the past 3 years, have been our region's managed our region's LFPA award from our local tribal government, and also was a sub award of our state LFPA award. And shout out to Tom and Amy. They're here from Michigan Department of Education. We've worked closely together over the last little bit on LFPA stuff. But that work has supported, at least in our region, over 35 farmers just in Northwest Lower Michigan and gotten food to around 70 food pantries and meal sites. For this project, I worked together with my colleague Jeff Smith, who is our communications director at Groundwork. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Christina. Hi, everybody. We're really honored to be here and to talk about this super important topic. And just a quick follow on to something Susan said, keeping the fires lit. That really says not just do a story, but keep doing stories. And that's a really essential part of this too. So everything we're talking about is yes, how to do one, but also keep doing them because our attention spans today are so short and there's so much coming at decision makers in our communities at every level that keep doing it is an important sort of subtext to everything we're talking about today. So I just want to say it before I forgot. Like I say, I'm Jeff Smith. I've written and edited my entire career. I've done a variety of things. I spent about a decade writing on a monthly journal about state and federal hazardous waste policy of all things. And oddly enough, I really love doing that. So you can take that for what it's worth. And then I spent another couple of decades as a writer, editor, editorial director, overseeing kind of a small fleet of consumer magazines. So I have consumer experience as well. Um, Along the way, I wrote a book about a married couple, very close friends of mine who became Amish. And then also recently at Groundwork, we put out a book about growing the local food economy that I was a producer on, and our colleague Diane Connors wrote it, and really turned out terrific. Great information there about growing local food economy. So encourage you to check that out. It's called Shared Abundance. So, but anyway, we're super looking forward to this today, and yeah, also look forward to hearing your questions at the end too. So thank you for being here.
And I'll just say I have been a member of this community of practice, I think, since close to the beginning, if not the beginning. And it has been my number one favorite resource for farm to food systems work. And so it's just personally exciting for me to be able to offer something to all of you who I have learned so much from over the years. So thanks again for having us. As Susan said, this particular project was a collaboration between the Wallace Center, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, and the Food Systems Leadership Network. These folks contracted Groundwork to write short story profiles of 3 different farm to food assistance efforts across the country. And as Susan said, these stories highlight the positive effects of work funded by LFPA. And as we all know, the LFPA program has been canceled. And so another goal for these stories was to not only highlight the good work, but to highlight this work in areas of strategic advocacy targeting areas and program, not just for LFPA, but for other programs like it. So NSAC helped us identify our story subjects, and these are the partners that agreed to be profiled for this work. They were Cheyenne River Buffalo Company, Jamie Murray from South Dakota, WNC from the Ground Up, that's Lisa Kelly in North Carolina, and the Common Market, we profiled Jeremy Logan and specifically their work in Houston, Texas. This past winter, Jeff and I interviewed each of these subjects about their experiences, their work, their community, and explored the impact of LFPA funding on their operations. After those interviews, we wrote three 750-word stories that illustrated what we learned, hopefully educated the reader, and inspired them to support programs like this in the future. And as Susan said, our stories were also printed and used in advocacy efforts at NSAC's winter meeting back in February. So today we'll follow this loose agenda. Our part one, we will talk to you a little bit about mission statements and some high-level advocacy points that we will offer as a way to structure your writing. We will then do a breakout session where you all will get a chance to meet each other in small groups and start working on some story planning and some mission statement writing of your own. And then the second half of this presentation will really be about the nuts and bolts of planning, interviewing, writing, and publishing these stories. Jeff and I will share some examples of things we've learned and hopefully give you some tools that you will use in your own storytelling efforts. So we hope that by participating today, you'll get those tools and those processes to write your own pieces that show the farm to food assistance work in your own communities and help educate your representatives and policymakers on the positive effects of these programs. So we will highlight case studies, share best practices for interviews, writing tips. You'll start brainstorming your work, and we'll share some aligned kind of higher level policy talking points that you can use. And through this, by participating, you will walk away with talking points that resonate, hopefully your own story ideas and a draft mission statement, a bunch of writing tips and tricks. And also, along with this presentation, we have developed an interview guide and a story template that we will share with you after this training that will help you. That'll be a good reference for you as you write your stories as well. So, thank you all for responding in the chat about who you are and where you are at in your own storytelling process. It's really interesting for me and for Jeff and I to hear what y'all are doing. And we will kick off this presentation now by moving to kind of the first stage that Jeff and I experienced when we were writing these pieces and what we recommend for all of you to get started as well. And that is to just reflect yourselves individually. What is the story from your own community that you want to tell? You can think about these answers, just kind of brainstorm them in plain language. What is a story you want to tell? Who is it for? And what do you want it to accomplish? And if you don't have anything specific in mind right now, you could think about the work you do, or if you know a cool farmer or a food pantry coordinator or someone in your community doing farm to food assistance work. I'll invite you now to just jot down a couple short notes or answers to these questions so that as we go through the steps in this training, you'll have an idea of what an example from your own community could look like. So once you have completed your own brainstorming, and we'll continue this in the breakout session, but once you do your brainstorming, the next step is to formalize these ideas into a more structured sentence called a mission statement. I'll turn it over to Jeff now to walk through what that mission statement is and how it can be used to guide your research, your interviewing, and ultimately the writing for your storytelling project.
Hey, thanks, Christina. So why a mission statement matters. So every story should have a mission statement. And what it does is it helps you by establishing the point of the piece. And that plays into making your work more efficient and helping guide all the decisions that come as you explore writing that piece. It creates clarity for what's included and, very importantly, what's excluded. Like, say you did an interview and you really want to kind of thank that person for doing a background interview by including their name and their quote in the piece, but maybe it doesn't really fit that well. The mission statement helps you say it's not in, it's out. You got to hone it down, that content, and the mission statement helps you do that. And then it also helps suggest the flow of content, the purpose of your piece, and then, helps you see your way through it to the end. Okay. And this, by the way, is some of the most important writing you'll do related to your piece, even though it happens before the story writing actually begins. Okay, go ahead, Christina. So, steps to drafting a mission statement. You're going to do some preliminary research on your subject, and in today's world, it seems like there's always something written about, folks doing interesting things already. You might have stories in your local paper or their social media posts, their website, whatever. So you're going to do some of that research, and then you're going to have a rough idea of your story, and you'll sketch out your mission statement. Now, one thing about the mission statements for the stories we're here to talk about today, and our assignment actually was to write a story that focused on one person and that had a word count of 750 words. And so it's very specific. So that is mostly what we're talking about today. Um, and one thing about that one person idea, a key purpose of that is we want the readers of these pieces to have an emotional bond with somebody in this story, this person. And that emotional bond is extremely important for creating a kind of fertile field for the concepts and ideas and kind of pitching this LFPA strategy. And without that emotional bond, you're kind of stuck with like a program explanation. And you really do not want that. It's very important. If anything, you will let this person's sense of humanity and their story nudge out some program information to create that emotional bond and keep that really strong. So that's going to be an important part of your mission statement and your story. So then you'll move ahead and do your interviewing and reporting, and then come back to your mission statement after you have all your information and revise that mission statement based on the things that your interview subject has told you. Okay. Oh, sorry, I meant to mention one other thing in the that single person thing. There's even research supporting that in the sense that people in the fundraising area have found that they get more money out of a campaign if they focus on one person compared to any more than one person, even two people, like say in the photos or the visuals related to the campaign. So it's kind of a why ask why thing because it's very counterintuitive, I think. But bonding with the one person is a key part of what we're talking about today. Okay, go ahead, Christina. So the sample mission statement, that one of our stories about Jamie Murray, but you use very plain language when you do this. I really encourage that. So my mission for this story is to share the experience of Jamie Murray to illustrate how LFPA funds can have a multi-layered impact, stimulating entrepreneurship, providing nutritional food, and building cultural spirit. The advocacy goal is to help decision makers see this type of program as investing in American small businesses. So a couple things going on here. For one, we see, the individual right at the top. And then as far as like me going back and adjusting this final version of the mission statement, the word multi-layered was straight from Jamie, and that I kind of instantly saw that as a really essential part of his message and also about any messaging related to this program. And we, as part of our assignment, the legislative audience was a key part of that. And we all know that entrepreneurship and investing versus handout is a powerful thing in Washington right now. So that idea of entrepreneurship is also in there. A typical journalist would not have an advocacy goal part of their mission statement, but since that's part of our mission, that would be sort of a second stage to your mission statement. So that's why that piece is in there. Okay, next. Okay, so with that said, we are going to go into our breakout activity now. And there will be breakout rooms of 3 or maybe 4 people each, and it's 15 minutes, so a nice chunk of time. And we'll ask you to introduce yourself, describe your story subject, or again, like Christine was saying, if you don't really have anybody really in mind, just pick somebody who would be good. State your key audience. Is it a federal legislative staffer? Is it some board in your community, or just the general population? And then state the change that you're hoping this piece will help bring about. And so Christina will be pasting, kind of the specific pieces of the assignment, the breakout room assignment into the chat so you can refer to them. But again, it's like, who's the subject you'd like to profile? What's the work that this person has been doing? Why does this work matter? Who is the audience for the piece? And what is the change you want to make as a result of this piece? So again, that'll be in the chat. You'll be able to see that from your breakout room. And I guess take it away, Christina.
All right. I put the instructions in the chat, so now our lovely facilitators will open our breakout rooms for you all, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
All right, friends, you should see an invitation to join a breakout room. If you have any technical issues doing that, just let us know and we'll try to help you out.
Shelby, it looks like you might need to move a couple people around. Do you want me
Yep,
to do that or you want it?
I got it. Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
hmm
There are a couple rooms with 2 people. Should I try to rearrange them too? Christina and Jeff, what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like it could go either way.
I'd say leave them. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I'm going to step away for a few minutes. So they're going to be for 15 minutes. Is that the
Yeah.
breakout? Okay,
Yep.
I'll be back.
Shelby, I think Matt might have stepped away, but I think they're in room 8 alone. So maybe you could just reassign that, and if they come back, then they could join one of the twos.
Perfect. I'll reassign to room 12. Good job. And Matt and Dorothy, if you are having any issues joining, just let us know and we'll try to figure it out together.
Okay. So Christina and I got a 39-inch snowfall a few days ago. So we've been housebound. And so this is like a nice, like, refreshing access to the outside world.
That's
Yeah.
possible? 39 inches?
Yeah. We had
Yeah.
blizzard conditions for 72 hours
It
or
was,
so.
yeah. That's it.
Um,
50-mile-an-hour winds, whiteouts. It was crazy.
Where in Michigan are you both?
so Michigan people do the hand thing, right? So,
My dad's from Lansing, so I
oh,
Oh,
grew
okay.
up
okay, okay.
winters and summers. I was in Grand Rapids, Lansing, Detroit, and Ann Arbor. So
Nice.
Oh,
So
okay,
Jeff and I
okay.
live just outside Traverse City. So we're up here. We have groundwork staff across the state, but Jeff and I
Oh,
happen to live like 10 minutes apart from each other up in Leelanau County. So,
oh, Traverse
um,
City is like one of my favorite places on the entire planet. Like it is such a beautiful and magical place. Oh,
Mhm.
my dad's best friend has his house is up there. So,
cool.
Oh,
Well,
um,
yeah.
if you ever make it our way, look us up. We'd
we
Yeah.
would,
get
I
you in
would
and
love
out.
to,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
My wife and
But
I
yeah,
moved to
we
Traverse
we
City
it
last
wasn't
week.
even as bad where we live in the Upper Peninsula. My our program food and farming program director, they got even more snow than we did.
I
Mhm.
So
can't even, I feel like if you all are getting that, I can't even imagine what the UP is getting. Like I
Yeah.
just, it's,
No, you'd see pictures where people are like snow blowing their sidewalk, and there's just like this tunnel. This is in the UP, where the snow is like they're up to their shoulders, and they're just like
Wow.
pushing. It's
I,
crazy.
I have this like my husband, because we would go to Michigan every Christmas, like that's where we spent all of our Christmases. And so I brought him when we had been dating for a while, and he's from Arizona. So like snow was not, and we was like using a snowblower for the first time and just absolutely miserable. Like we have this picture of him just like with the snowblower, and it was one of my favorite things. You guys just do snow so differently.
Thank you for accepting me so late.
I'm glad you're here.
Glad you're here. Yeah.
Welcome back, friends. We are just waiting for folks to trickle in.
Okay, it seems like most of us are back now from our breakout rooms. We hope that time was helpful and that you enjoyed getting to know others who are in this call, that you had some time to brainstorm your potential stories, and you got to practice a little bit with writing a mission statement. Is anyone willing to be brave and come off mute and share the draft mission statement that they wrote? We'd love to hear an example of what you came up with, or you can just type yours in the chat and we'll read a couple out loud. But if anyone's willing to share, we'd love to hear some of what you came up with. No one's feeling brave today. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
But hopefully it was a useful time for you and you got to know each other a little bit anyway.
I can
Christina,
share.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay,
Christina,
well, I
you know
did.
me.
Huh?
I said, Christina knows me. I'm not afraid to talk. So, um, Tom Priest from Michigan. For the partner I would pick, we had a multi-generational organic blueberry farmer who told us the story of the year before LFPA. He had to shop around what he had left of his crops to larger competitors and was only offered pennies on the dollar. He found out about LFPA. They purchased the rest of what he had at the end of his season, and then they made plans to buy for next year and the following year. And not only did that get him a fair market price rather than pennies on the dollar, and they also gave them an opportunity where they were considering closing down the farm, and instead, family came back into town, bought 10 more acres across the street, had another person who used to work for them, a couple more acres down the street, and were able to just grow their whole process just because LFPA he connected with LFPA when they were at the end of their rope.
Wow, that's a great story. Mimi, you were about to share something?
Yes. So I'm sorry, I'm not the best with names. I was maybe with Sarah, but sorry if I got that wrong. But it was great. I mean, I really liked this breakout format. And so we didn't necessarily land on like a mission statement, but um her work was like really expanded through LFPA, being able to work with farmers in like rural Western Michigan. And then when the funding was cut, they had to scale back, but like the farmers loved it, people loved it, like it was obviously a good thing for everybody. So they were able to get some more support from like philanthropy and like fundraising campaigns. And now they're getting into like food as medicine. But I would say like their mission statement right now might be something like, you know, I don't know how to put these things together, but it's like, you know, just being able to continue the work that they had already built to allow farmers to farm and people to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, keep your mission statements in mind as you start to talk about interviewing and doing your stories. Another kind of backbone piece that Jeff and I can suggest involves some higher level advocacy talking points for a policy audience. And we wanted to talk about this along with the mission statement because, as we've mentioned before, our hope for these stories is that you will help inspire more support for LFPA and programs like it. And so for our project, and with guidance from our partners, we developed these high-level talking points that we wanted to illustrate to our key audience, which was the policymakers and their representatives from the geographic areas that we highlighted, um, with the hope that we start to build momentum and have aligned strategy in our storytelling efforts. And these points are something that you all know. We all know this intuitively from doing our work. Um, but the goal is to package these intuitive, like highlights or positive things about these programs, package them in a way that will resonate with lawmakers and other supporters or potential supporters of this work. So these talking points are, this work supports farmers of all scales. We know that many federal programs kind of leave out smaller scale farmers or they can be inaccessible to certain kinds of farmers. LFPA supported farmers of all scales. We know that they built reliable domestic markets and local supply chains, and we know that they improved the healthful quality of food provided at pantries, schools, and other community places. This quote here is taken right from one of the NSAC guides on this kind of advocacy. We need investments in proven, popular agricultural programs that drive innovation, open market opportunities, and keep farmers on the land. So, with those in mind, Jeff and I really looked for ways to show the impact of the programs that we highlighted and tried to include details and quotes from our subjects that supported these high-level talking points. So, on this slide, there's just a couple of examples that I'll share. Jamie Murray in South Dakota talked about when they realized how dependent they were on long distance supply chains and really emphasized the fact that they could shorten those chains and have some food sovereignty and food coming from their own community. Jeremy at the Common Market put it simply, these purchases also help keep farmers solvent and expand their businesses. And then Lisa from WNC from the ground up called it out very well to say she emphasized American small farmers, that these programs were an investment in American small farmers, and also supported the institutions like schools and food pantries that provide care to vulnerable people. So she was highlighting the real win-win nature of this work there. So now that we've talked about these high-level advocacy points and also mission statements, we are going to move on now to talking about the nuts and bolts of this work, sharing some tips and tricks, examples of that will help you plan and prepare for your interviews, the writing, revision, and publication of your stories. So, as I mentioned earlier, before we wrote our stories, Jeff and I conducted 1 hour interviews with each profile subject, and that informed our writing. We wanted to share a couple of things that helped us be successful in that. And that success starts with being intentional and communicative in your outreach to your subjects and your scheduling of your interviews. Our number one tip is to be flexible and willing to work with whatever schedule your subject has. I don't know a single person in farm to food assistance work who keeps a 9 to 5 at a desk. If you're talking about farmers or food pantry coordinators, food box aggregators, whoever it is, they're not sitting in front of a laptop all day waiting to answer emails, right? So when you make contact with your subject, ask them what will work best for them and be willing to call, to text, to communicate after hours or on the weekend if that's when your subjects are free. Our second tip is know what your expectations are for your subject and communicate them clearly up front so that they can consent to the project and understand what their commitment will be. So for our particular project, we asked our subjects to participate in a 1 hour interview. We asked them to respond briefly to follow-up questions via email. We asked them to review the drafts of our stories and make any corrections or changes that they wanted to make. And we also asked them to provide 5 to 10 photos, if possible, to help illustrate the stories and their work. Everything is just easier when the subjects have the background on this stuff and the project in general, and that they know what to expect. Being clear about that is super helpful, and it helps too if you're working on a tight timeline. So Jeff and I were working on just a couple of months. We had to get these stories done, and so we were able to tell our subjects up front, like we will need some turnaround or a tight turnaround time on this. And since they knew that in advance, they were able and willing to be super responsive to us when we were scheduling and also when we had questions. Finally, we suggest that you offer a stipend for your subject's time and expertise. This helps contribute to more equitable storytelling and also more diverse representation. Many folks, and especially underserved folks, can't participate in projects where their time isn't being compensated. And so for our project, we offered a $250 stipend that covered the subject's time for all those commitments that I mentioned, the interview, the follow-ups, the review, and that really helped us demonstrate our respect for their time and their expertise. Next, Jeff's going to talk more about the interviews. So go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. Okay, so this is just kind of a checklist here as you're getting ready to head off into your interview. This first thing, do you do it in person, Zoom, phone, a live conversation basically, or do you do email? So I would super strongly suggest that you avoid email if at all possible. And one of the key reasons for that is, our written dialect and our spoken dialect are different. They're just plain different. And when someone answers your questions in email, it sounds written. And one of the big problems with that for our particular mission, and these stories in particular, is it drains a certain element of humanity out of our speech. And so you will not get those amazing, nuanced, powerful quotes that you're going to get in a live conversation. Christine and I did all of our interviews by Zoom, and that worked great. I've done a gazillion by phone. That can also work well. If you can do it in person, I'd say that'd be your first choice if at all possible. Um, and you could consider yourself really lucky because then you can also get photos while you're there. But anyway, that's one super important point. Second, if you're at this point, you have your preliminary background research done, so you're feeling solid on that. You have your key questions written out, and then you've also got permission to record, and you're set to record with whatever tech you're going to be using to do that. So again, if you're solid on all these things, you're going to just go into that interview really feeling nice and comfortable. Okay, next one, Christine. So this one might sound a little mushy, but I really think it's one of the single most important points we can give you today, and that is keep the conversation in a storytelling mindset. And by that I mean help when you're referring to it and talking about it with your subject. Don't let it go into the idea of an interview, like a media interview. You don't really want that because, for one, you're probably dealing with people who don't deal with the media. And even though you're not technically part of the media, they're going to perceive you that way. And if they're thinking media interview, you can feel it in yourself, right? These kind of defensive barriers go up, and you're thinking more narrowly about your responses and about the questions and all that. What we want that subject to do is enter into a storytelling mindset. And when you do that, of course, you have a much more sort of 360-degree access of all the stuff in your mind. And we're also asking them to move into a place that they know and they're comfortable with. I'm going to tell a story, you know? And so when I'm talking with interview subjects, I try to be intentional about not even saying the word interview. Like I might say, I'd like to have a conversation or even a chat or talk about your story or language like that. Um, and I don't know, I just feel like it's an important part of it heading into it. And one super easy way to help them move into a storytelling mindset is to just simply ask them to tell a story, right? Tell me the story of your Buffalo business, Jamie. So relative to that is another thing that we did is, and I do this a lot, is say, let's start at the beginning and roll it forward. So I turn to chronology in the interview process, and oftentimes you would use chronology in your storytelling as well. So you're kind of gathering the information in the way that you are maybe likely to use that information. So that also helps the efficiency of your writing. And so I say, start at the beginning, and I'll just kind of I'll just tuck questions in as we go along. Is that okay? Yes. And that's the approach we pretty much use. And then at the end, you look at your questions and see if there's anything you missed and kind of deal with those at the end. Um, and so one example of, say, this approach is a quote that we got from Jamie with the Buffalo story. Um, so we asked him to start at the beginning. The beginning could be 2 weeks ago, 20 years ago, it depends on the story. In Jamie's story, the beginning was thousands of years ago, because I think probably everyone on this call understands, how important that kind of beginning is to Indigenous people. And so Jamie was talking about the buffalo, and he says they're part of our creation stories and they provided everything for us. They were our economy for thousands and thousands of years. And when the buffalo faced extinction, our people faced extinction right along with them. Such a powerful quote, and also he mentioned some of the power zone words for our own stories, this idea of economy and helping people understand the buffalo as part of a big economy was also kind of an amazing thing. So you're not going to get a quote like that with an email interview. That that just will not happen. Okay, next slide. Uh, so you're going to need to help guide people to emotional moments. And again, back to that idea of conveying this subject's sense of humanity to that reader so that emotional bond can happen. That's such an important part of what we're doing here. And so some people are not going to naturally do that, even if they are able to kind of be a storyteller in this time. So we're going to ask them to go a little closer with their emotions. And so you have to be really listening for, you know, times where you might say, how'd that make you feel when that happened? And, that sort of thing. And one question that I like a lot, and it's always fun to ask, is, and we did it with these interviews. Can you recall kind of an everyday moment when maybe you sort of looked around and just thought something about what you saw made you think, this is why I do this? And what I'm always amazed at is it seems like every person I've ever asked that question to has an actual answer. And it's always fun to hear what that answer is for that person. I always really enjoy hearing that. And so kind of related to that, when you ask people to tell their stories or say this answering this question in particular, ask people, tell it like a movie. Could you tell that like a movie? Like characters moving, things happening, like what's happening there? And what's really nice about that is it really helps the story come alive. And in your own writing, um, I used to have something taped up above my desk that said, tell it like a movie, because I always wanted to remember, tell it like a movie, because it brings a lot of energy, visual energy. You want to write with visuals where it makes sense. So anyway, here's an example of a quote that kind of exemplifies that. We asked Jeremy Logan at the Texas Food Hub about the packing line and oh, it's an important part of obviously central to their work there. And I think it was Christina said, let's look closer at that. Tell us more about like what exactly do you see there happening? And he told this story about how it was so important to him to go down to the packing line and talk to the people doing that work. And they were mostly Spanish speakers. And he would say to them, es para tu abuela, which means it's for your grandmother. Pack that box as if it's for your grandmother. And so just a story like that just is such an emotional moment. And to the reader, it will come through with so much impact. And again, it conveys his sense of humanity, his sense of who he is, and that allows that bond to happen. Okay, next slide. Or yeah. Um, so similar to guiding people to emotional moments, we want to guide them to visual details. And it's especially important when you're on the phone or Zoom and you're not there to get anything in your notebook from, what you happen to be seeing on site. Um, and so some ways you can do that is, ask them to zoom in. Um, like say someone talks about, their pickup truck or whatever. You say that pickup truck you mentioned, what's hanging from that rear view mirror? Or I was talking to a guy once who was doing a story in Afghanistan, but he wasn't there. He was talking to a soldier. And the guy was talking about crawling through a tunnel with some other soldiers. And he told me he asked the guy, what did it look like on the bottom of that soldier's shoe in front of you? And so the point is not only to get that detail that you ask about, but to help the storyteller realize that you want that sort of thing as you're talking, and you can kind of help remind that person of that as you go. But it sets that expectation in their mind, and they're going to be on the lookout for those details too. So those details too can be not necessarily just visual. It's kind of like what your fifth grade teacher said, you write with all your senses. It's very true. This is an ancient thing we're doing here, and these fundamentals that we learned long ago are still very legit. So what do you see? What do you hear, feel, smell, taste? Um, and okay, we have a next slide. So here we asked Lisa Kelly at WNC. She was also talking about packing day, right? It's, again, central part of this whole food hub operation. And Christina asked her, again, like make that scene come alive for us. Like, what do we see in there? She's like, well, volunteers and staff run up and down stairs in between cold storage rooms and delivery trucks. Many hands work along the line to pack those vegetables into individual orders. So you can just see in your mind's eye, you can kind of feel that story come alive as those people are running up and down the stairs and you're picturing those hands. And hands, by the way, are a really great thing to bring into a story. So if you just, I guess, a little side note there, look for opportunities to do that, to like mention hands in your stories. There's just something powerful about them as an image. But again, bringing it to life with three-dimensional, ideas and what you see. Okay, next one. Okay, back to
So
you.
once you've completed your interview, it's time to sit down and write your story. So if you're anything like Jeff and I, you'll have tons of pages of notes, a messy interview transcript, some emails back and forth. Um, the writing part is where you translate all of those notes and that source material into a structured story. For our work, we were given a 750 word count. And some people are really comfortable working within word counts. Um, for me, for example, it's really easy for me to just spit out an outline and write 750 words. Other people, it's a little different. Jeff gave me the advice that it can be helpful to think about a word count. It can be helpful to translate a word count into paragraphs. And his advice to me was assume that a paragraph is about 100 words. So for 750 words, you're working with 7 or 8 paragraphs. But the most important thing is to make sure that your structure is cohesive. You want to have a beginning, a middle, and end. Um, so that is the goal. And one example structure that we have to offer here on the screen is a who, what, why it matters, and what you want flow to your information. You can use the beginning of your story to introduce your subject and show the work. And then you can use the middle and the end to illustrate the impact of the work within your community, and then conclude by inviting your audience to support the work. No matter what your own writing process looks like, you want to make sure to keep that mission statement that you draft and also your high-level policy points in mind, and then look for the compelling details, the powerful quotes, and the human essence that you gathered from your interviews. Look for those details to then support those higher level goals of your storytelling. More writing tips from Jeff. A couple things that might be helpful.
Okay. So you are ready to write. A few tips here. This is one of the most important things is write in the dialect of the everyday person. And by that, I mean avoid the dialects of academia and the nonprofit world. And what's really hard about this from a writer's standpoint or someone in the nonprofit world is that it's very hard to recognize and be aware of your own dialect, basically. And so I kind of think of it as that saying they say that like fish are not aware of water. Well, that's kind of what it is like with a dialect. And uh, so one thing that can help is if you actually have like a friend or someone in your life who you can fly a piece past and say they're not super familiar with your work, but kind of have a general idea what you do. And if they would read that and then flag anything that just feels like nonprofit speak, like most people have never heard the phrase food systems, something that is so common to your everyday and baked into your work and your thinking. They've never even heard that term, and it's hard to remember that if you're living inside that world. So that is, I don't know, that's just really important thing. It's hard to do, but I just really encourage you. One thing I've told our staff is use all the words you learned by the time you were 12 and none of the words that you learned in grad school. And that might sound offensive or like a joke, but I actually do mean that. Uh, so selective use of quotes. This is really important. So if you live in a small town, especially, you'll see small town newspaper writing have a structure like this. A paragraph from the writer, a paragraph that's a quote, a paragraph from the writer, a paragraph that's a quote, and kind of steps through that A-B structure to the end. You never see that really in national, feature, newspaper writing, whatever, New York Times, Washington Post. What you see is the writer controlling the message, the line of story with their own words, and then using the quote to what I call bring the special. The quote brings the special. It does not serve sort of utilitarian purposes, okay? That's for you as a writer to do because you can handle that in the dialect of writing a lot better. You can get clarity, you can have efficiency, you can really make sure that idea is coming through the way it needs to come through, like say the explanation of how FPA works or whatever. But then you save the quote to, to bring emphasis, vitality, emotion, interest, credibility. And again, to back to that sense of bonding and sense of humanity, to bring the sense of humanity that's so important and that emotional delivery. So that means you tend to want to try to use short quotes that really get to the heart of what you're asking that quote to deliver, whatever that is, but not big long quotes. Um, so selective use of numbers, another thing you want to be really careful of. You don't want to shove a bunch of numbers into a paragraph. And if you do start using a bunch of numbers, it's so important to the stories we're going to be telling, right? Like dollars and pounds and numbers of meals served and like all that sort of stuff. A lot of numbers. They're very important to the story having impact. Okay. But if you can use them, spread them out a little bit, round them up to make them a little easier to take in, quickly, or turn them into kind of a visual thing, like say you're talking about 100,000 tons of gravel. Well, maybe you say a mile and a half long train of gravel trucks, just to help people have perspective on those kind of numbers that you might be using. Okay, next one. Don't overwork transitions. This maybe goes against some of the things you've been taught through school, but transitions are super important as your teachers taught you along the way. But what can happen is you start writing these big long transition statements, like just in case you didn't get it, we're moving from here onto this next thing, and I'm going to explain that to you. That's the kind of thing you can dispense with because really you want your ideas to be tight and cohesive and they're developing so that going from one to the other, even if it is a transition moment, the reader's still there with you and you kind of got to give them some credit. So you want a transition that's very efficient, very short. Like even a word like meanwhile or by comparison or something like that, or even no word at all if the next idea kind of does the work for you. Um, and so what I like to do is kind of write the piece in a draft and leave all that transition stuff out unless it really, really needs it. And then as you go back through to revise, you'll see places where, yeah, that really does need a little more help to glue those ideas together, pass that baton on to the next, section or whatever. But err on the side in those first drafts of super light touch with the transitions and really help speed things along not get gummed up as ideas unload. Okay, so this one, I kind of hate to go into grammar here, but this one's just really important. Be diligent about pronoun reference. By that I mean when you use the word it or they or them or whatever, is it instantly clear to that reader what you are talking about? And it's really easy for it to not be instantly clear. And so when you're doing your edits, and every time you see an it or a they or a them or whatever, ask yourself, does that reader know exactly what that's referring to? And a lot of times you'll see that it doesn't. And so the rule is that pronoun refers to the nearest noun that came before it. Okay, so here's just a simple sentence I wrote. Close the fridge door, it's letting the cold out. So we're clear the it is referring to the fridge door. Obviously, a lot of times you're going to have words between that noun and the word it. The further that reference noun gets from that pronoun, the more you're going to maybe want to restate the noun or use a word that means the same thing. Like, say you use the company name before, and here you just say the company. But my point is just be really careful with your pronouns. It sounds small and unimportant. It's very, very important to a smooth read. And then use active voice. If you've looked into writing and all, you've heard this, and there's tons online about it. We don't have time to do a deep dive, but basically it's putting an actor into the sentence versus not having an actor. So the farmer planted the row versus no actor in the sentence. The row was planted. And one issue you get into here, if you've been in academia or nonprofit grant world, you're taught actually to do this is called passive voice when there's no actor. So it's reversing maybe a lot of what you've been taught, especially in like scientific journals and whatnot. So takes a little practice. I encourage you to just read up on that a little bit. It's not that tricky, but very important again. Okay, I think. Okay, back to you,
All
Christine.
right. Thanks, Jeff. We're closing in on our time here, so we're going to move kind of quickly through these last slides so we have time for questions. But once you've written your piece, it's important to do some amount of revision to make sure you're offering the strongest story that you can. Our recommendations are, again, to allow time for the subject of the piece to read your draft and make sure that they have the ability to make changes or correct you on the things that you misunderstood. This adds a little time to the overall timeline of the project, but it's important for ethical storytelling and for equity. It allows the subjects control over the final product and make sure that they are 100% comfortable with how they're being depicted and what messages are being communicated about them and their work. So that's super important. Another thing to consider when you're in your revision process is the final format of your piece. So, as I had mentioned, the pieces that Jeff and I wrote were printed and used at an NSAC meeting. And so the screenshots here are of the Canva template that we were used to format our stories. So, think about where your stories will end up. If they're going to be on your website or in a newsletter, they might be formatted differently than if they're printed out on physical paper or used for social media purposes. You'll want to finalize your photo selections and your credits, make sure your graphic design looks good, arrange for your printing needs if you have them. And also, when you're revising, it's good time to look for those formatting opportunities like subheaders, pull out quotes, strong things or strong, compelling messages for social media. And if you have other people review your writing, it's a good time to ask your reviewers, what stands out to them? What makes this a compelling piece? And that can help you highlight those things via subheaders and quotes and things like that. We're going to speed through the photo tips. We do have a guide that will be a written resource shared out to all of you that will expand more upon photo tips. But just some things that we use at Groundwork and to include shooting during golden hour, so that time in the morning or in the evening when the light looks super good. We encourage you to use portrait mode on your phones. Food pictures as well as portrait pictures both look great in portrait mode. Don't be afraid to get close to your subjects and take a lot of photos, more than you think. At least 20, 50 is good too. But if you follow these tips, you will end up with a lot of really compelling visuals that will help illustrate your stories and draw people in. Here's what I meant about portrait mode. It makes food look good too. Here's an example of that. All right, we have time now for questions. I will take us off screen share so we can see you all. Does anyone have any questions about what we've heard today or need any more clarification about anything?
Yeah, Christina, I can share one that came up earlier in the presentation. Tess had asked, what would you suggest in regards to sharing questions ahead of time for interview subjects to think through and prepare? Or is it better to make it feel more like a conversation and bring up the questions more organically?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jeff, I'm curious what you think about this, but I will share that we did not share our questions in advance with our interviewers or our subjects. So it was very organic, and Jeff and I did have a set of, questions that we wanted to ask. But the conversation also flowed very naturally, which I think really came out in our stories in terms of highlighting those human storytelling details that are super compelling. So that's how we did it. Jeff, what do you think about that question?
Yeah. A lot of people ask to see them, and I'm not opposed to that. Like Christina said, we didn't happen to do that in these, but if somebody asks, I would say yes, especially the kind of stories we're talking about. We're not, this isn't like whatever, some investigation to espionage or something. This is telling a beautiful story about some important work that we're kind of all in on. So I wouldn't be opposed to that if somebody liked that, or even to offer it if you would like to. Yeah. Mhm. Okay, we got 3 minutes. I just want to say, since we have a couple minutes, those photo tips, that's the shortest, best photo class ever. If you use those 4 tips, you will come back and you will say to somebody who's close to you, can you believe I took this photo? I promise. Golden hour, a lot of photos, get close, portrait mode. You'll be surprised. And they're important, like photos travel in today's world, social media, and they'll do a lot of work for you if you get some good photos, a lot of work.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Well, thank you all for your time and your attention today. Like I said, we have developed a storytelling guide, which will be a formatted PDF that will walk you through the material that we've presented today, and also will have some um, suggestions for writing questions, the template for the stories and for the mission statement, and some other resources. So you'll be getting those in your email once we finish up some final revisions. And I'm also going to put Jeff and I's emails in the chat. Please feel free to connect with us or reach out if you have follow-up questions or thoughts you want to share. You've been a lovely audience, so thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everybody.
Hey y'all, we just learned a lot of great info. If you wouldn't mind, yeah, throwing up an emoji, show your love for Jeff and Christina for everything they just shared with us. And then we would love to know, like, what was an aha moment for you during today's call? So before you go, if you wouldn't mind adding that in the chat, letting us know what really sparked some ideas or creativity for you, it would be really great for us to be able to reflect on. And then lastly, we look forward to seeing you on April 16th for our next Community of Practice call. If you would like to reach out and have a conversation with any of us, we are always willing to do that. Our email addresses are on the screen here. You've also been getting emails from Parker, so you can just reply directly to those if you have any questions or want some time to chat. It was lovely seeing you all today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, whether you're in blizzards or this wild heat wave that we're having on the West Coast.
Thank you. It was so great. Sorry I missed most of it.
Thanks for being here, Marion. We
Well,
will send out that guide and the recording so you can make sure
great.
you catch what you
Thank you.
missed.
And I just put in there, thank you for choosing the Buffalo story. You have no idea what that meant to me because I've been working on the Buffalo coming to Boulder, back to Boulder for 3 years.
Wow.
Mhm.
Amazing work.
A powerful story that Jamie has for sure.